Hey, there is something very exciting going on right now in the world of real estate. Over the last 10 years, there has been an incredible increase in the attention of the sector. More and more people are taking money out of the stock market and putting it in their own control. But what most investors need right now is a due diligence checklist that they can use before making their final decision. And that is exactly what I created with my ebook, 111 Questions Investors Should Be Asking. You can actually get it right now at cfcmentorshipprogram.com/questions. It's literally a list of 111 questions that I ask before investing in each deal. Again, that's cfcmentorshipprogram.com/questions. So, should you be your biggest fan or your worst critic? Now, in this show, I always like to talk about diversification, so it's probably not surprising that I'm going to do so in this short Monday Minutes, but the reality is, it depends. It's a really important question, but it depends on a lot of things. I think what it depends on mostly is what helps you achieve your goals over the long run. Should you be the person who is constantly fanning your own flame, or should you be someone who's constantly second-guessing your work? Or some variation of that. Like I said, I think the question really comes down to what helps you achieve your goals over the long term. That last part's really important. We'll talk about why. Now, in order to even jump into this, we have to talk about goals, first of all. So what does that mean? Which goals do you have? A lot of people break this down into personal, professional, familial, and then maybe spiritual, religious, philosophical, all in one kind of category. So what does it mean to have personal goals? Well, I want to lose 20 pounds. I want to run my first 5K. I want to bench press this. I want to learn how to swim. I want 24 hours with no phones or texts, some kind of personal goal that you set out to accomplish on your own. Professional goals, what does that sound like? Well, that's pretty straightforward. I want to do my first multifamily deal. I want to raise $10 million. I want to be able to provide for my family with my income stream. Familial goals, what does that sound like? Well, I want to take vacation. I want to be able to have 1 hour with the kids on one-on-one time for at least 3 times a week, something like that. Spiritual goals. And again, this is coming to some understanding about philosophy, church for a lot of people, defining your purpose, living a life that's highly aligned with that purpose. Personal, professional, familial, and spiritual. Then, if you're tracking along with those, you can actually quantify whether you should be your biggest fan or your worst critic, because over the long term, you can actually quantify whether or not you're succeeding. So in this conversation, though, what does it mean to be your biggest fan? This is an advocate for yourself, someone who is very proud of their own work, someone who is eager to talk about the things they're working on, someone who is eager to share what they've learned with other people, someone who is a big proponent of what they've created. Now, what does it mean to be your worst critic? And this can be tricky. Someone who is demanding higher and higher of themselves, someone who's constantly looking on the horizon, someone who can be a little bit hard on themselves. We all know people that balance too far on either side of these, and it can create some real challenges, not only for yourself, but also for the people that love you. So a couple of examples come to mind here. And I've given one of these examples before, but I think this is a really pronounced example that is important to discuss. The typical biggest fan versus worst critic example is Kanye and Kobe. Let's talk about Kobe first. So you got to put yourself in his position. What did he need to continue to perform at an elite high performance level? He needed a lot of criticism. If you go back and listen to any interview with any of his teammates, what did they constantly talk about what they did before big games with Kobe? They gave him negative press that he was receiving. They gave him fuel through negativity that was out in the world. Oh, last time we played them, you only scored 13 points. They've been talking about the fact that they're going to shut you down to less than 10 this time. What'd Kobe say? Keep telling me that. Keep telling me that. You go into that, quote, dark place, and then what happens? 60 points. Now, why is that? Well, you got to put yourself in his position, right? He enters the league at 17. He's the sixth person in the history of the league to leave high school and go into the NBA. Probably since he was 13 or so, everyone's comparing him to Michael Jordan. the greatest of all time. The greatest of all time narrative is basically what he's been living with his whole life. And so what did he need? He needed to feel like others were questioning him, that he wasn't God, that he wasn't infallible. He needed to feel like his work ethic was in question, that other people may be outworking him. So that's what he used. Now, if you feel like you're internally feeling like Kobe Bryant, sometimes it's good to have those question marks put inside your mind. But that Kobe Bryant situation is very, very unique. Now, on the other side of the spectrum, we've got Kanye West. If you want to hear something honestly bizarre and fascinating and has aged in a very unique fashion, go listen to Kanye West's interview on The Breakfast Club from 2013. It's really important. 2013, not the one from 2015. Now, I'm not a huge fan of Kanye's music. I'm not even a huge fan of Kanye personally, but there's something fascinating about Kanye, and we all can't deny it, right? It's like kind of the same thing with Trump. It's like, whether you like him or you hate him, like name the number one most popular real estate developer of all time. Okay, Trump. Now, we got that one. Name the second most popular real estate developer of all time. I don't really know. All right. So that's one thing he's done. What else did he do? He won the presidential election on his first try. So like something weird's going on with this guy, right? Same with Kanye West. Love him or hate him, it's a thing. Go back and listen to that interview with him on Breakfast Club from 2013. And it's very interesting because what is happening, Kanye West at the time, unquestionably already well on his way to being considered a top 10 influential person in the rap and hip hop community in a lot of people's minds. And this interview is him frustrated. Frustrated because he feels like he's not operating on the level at which he belongs and deserves to be operating. He feels like he's not creating at a level that is what he's capable of providing to the hip hop community, to fashion, to technology. And what he sounds like in 2013 is a crazy person. And what he sounds like in 2013 is someone who's really ungrateful. But it's so interesting to think about because I listened to this interview when it took place in 2013 and it did not go over well. And even in the interview in 2013, he talks about the interviews that he was doing in 2010 and 2009. And guess what? Those interviews didn't go over well then either, but they certainly aged well. And by the time he was doing this one in 2013, those were famous interviews. In this interview in Breakfast Club, he's just talking about how he wants to be one of the most influential people in fashion and how he isn't able to really provide and create and act on a platform that is of his caliber unless he's a billionaire, because billionaires operate with this whole new strategy, whole new set of rules. Basically, kingship exists in America. It's just that you have to have $1 billion to participate, and you have to have $1 billion to get interviewed, and you have to have $1 billion to get into the building. Well, guess what? It's 2020. Kanye is a billionaire, considered by a lot of people to be an extremely important figure in the world of fashion because of his impact on shoes in particular. But it's an important lesson to learn about where to balance on that scale. Because if you're that person that's constantly hard on yourself, that constantly feels frustrated, that constantly feels like Kanye in 2013, and that you're constantly looking on the horizon, it's very hard on your psyche for sure. Sometimes it can make people not move at a speed at which is conducive to their own success. But most importantly, if you're hard on yourself, if you're a biggest critic, if you're someone who's never satisfied with your own success, it's very hard on your significant other, particularly. It can be very hard on your best friend. It can be very hard on your close family members for sure. But the person who loves you the most, that can be really challenging. Now, my wife, Chrissy, and I, we get to work a lot together. And it's amazing. I mean, we get to work, I should say we get to work a lot together when I can afford her because she's very talented and she knows it. But when we do that, people make mistakes. We're working on big projects, trying to work at breakneck pace, things happen. And if she makes a mistake and says something bad about the quality of work, it breaks my heart far worse than it hurts her. Why? Because the rule is no one can talk about my wife like that, at least to let her. So just keep that in mind as you're constantly thinking about being your biggest fan or being your biggest critic and where you fall on that spectrum, because some people, their long-term results are to be critical of themselves. Some people, they need to be their biggest fan. They need to be thinking constantly that they should be on a higher and higher and higher level. Everybody falls on different pieces of the spectrum. I'll give you an example where I felt like I needed to be my biggest fan to operate at the level at which I was capable. When I wrote Raising Capital for Real Estate, the only reason I put in the type of work that was dedicated to that book was because I felt like it could play an important role in our industry of real estate. The only reason I gave away that level of detail, the only reason that I put my heart and soul in all those stories and all that vulnerability that I had to share with the listener base and the readership is because I felt like this was a tool to help me accomplish one of my goals, which is to mark the industry and to help people get money out of the stock market, give them the tools to help their friends and family and others do that. But one part in particular that was really where I needed to be my biggest fan was recording the audiobook. And I know my audio editor will hear this and start laughing, but it was the most grueling thing I've ever done as an entrepreneur. I submitted 16 hours of audio of me saying the same sentence 3 or 4 times, which was then edited down to about 5.5 hours. My poor audio editor had to listen to me repeat sentences over and over again until they're absolutely perfect. What would be the entire reason of doing that? The only reason of doing that would be that I was working on something that I felt would be extremely meaningful. So just keep that in mind. Hold yourself to a very high standard, but it's really important that you not be overly negative because it's not only you that can be impacted by that, it's also your loved ones. So hopefully this helps. It's always a balance. Know thyself, right? Know the thing that works best for you over the long term. And that's the way you can get those goals accomplished. All right, listeners, you know the routine. This show is all about learning, making wise investments, and protecting and growing your capital. So if you're interested in these topics, make sure to hit the subscribe button. Of course, if you've already enjoyed a couple of great episodes, don't be shy, leave a review. It really helps the show's visibility. And lastly, if you're an accredited investor and you're interested in learning more about our investment opportunities, the types of deals that I personally invest in, go to asymcapital.com. That's ASYMcapital.com. Thanks a lot.